let's start with you, Chris. Uh, what comes across from our discussions is that you've got a passion. Now, I listen to so many people who say, "I've got to tell you what my passion is," and then they talk about it, and I know they haven't got passion for that at all. It's just something that they think they should be doing, or their friends want them to do. But you were telling me about your passion for radio, and it was like 100% authentic. So can you tell us all a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think it started as a child, and as many sort of I think many passions do. If you want to be a footballer, if you want to be a pop star, if you want to be a radio DJ or a mathematician or a doctor, it starts quite young. And I've done quite a lot of thinking actually in the last probably 4 or 5 years, and I've had some counselling and stuff, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But I think for me, I grew up in a different environment to maybe many other people. My mum and my stepdad were part of a cult, a religion, whatever you want to call it, a doomsday apocalyptic cult. And for me, I used to everything we did was wrapped up in this church. They were nice people. It wasn't a horrible environment. It wasn't, some of the horror stories you hear about cults now. It wasn't like that at all. I don't think I was in any danger in any way. Maybe mentally, but not physically. And I think that for me, not being allowed to associate that much with the world, it was all very insular. I discovered on my radio Capital, and it was just the world. It was my connection to the outside world. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. These people are in London on the top of the Euston Tower, broadcasting to telling everybody their stories and playing the hits. And oh, this is amazing. So I think for me, that's where my passion for radio came from. For me, it was an escapism. But I think it became more than that. I needed to be part of that. I needed to be on the radio. And it wasn't just the radio. I wasn't interested in Radio One. I wasn't interested in Radio Essex or, all the state capital. I needed to be on Capital. And it was such a burning ambition. It's so weird when I talk about it now. I can't remember how I did it. I did it, obviously, but I don't remember how I formulated it and how I got to it. Because I would have been 10, 11, and I'd pretend to be on Capital. So I'd be manifesting, which I didn't even realize I was doing, but I pretended to be on Capital in my bedroom, just to feel normal and feel part of the world. So obviously the normal things as well of, oh, I'm going to be on the radio, going to be famous, going to get paid loads of money. There were normal kid reactions to it as well,
Yeah,
but it was a little bit deeper for me. It was a need more than a want.
that's a really good way of putting it. And I've heard this kind of thing so many times, and it is manifesting, or what some people would call, advanced visualization. And you're putting yourself so much in the picture that the picture becomes a reality.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, you got your dream job with Capital, and I mean, what happened? Did it end well or not well? I mean, you've moved on to
Yeah,
all kinds of other things since, I
yeah,
hear.
no, when I got there, it was the dream come true. Taking religion aside from it, but anybody landing a job at a big radio station like that would be living in paradise every morning you woke up, and I was. It was a realization of something I dreamt of. I'd been waiting for it for so long. I was probably 29 by the time I got there, and bearing in mind I was pretending to be on the radio there at 9. It was 20 years in the making. But I remember putting the microphone up for the first time on a Saturday breakfast show. I've got the audio somewhere as well. And I put the mic up and I said 95.8 Capital FM. And I just felt complete. I felt whole. Probably like, someone like Scott will do when he goes on stage and sings one of his songs. I felt completely normal. And I had an amazing, I was there for about 10 years and I absolutely loved it. I met some of the nicest people in the world. I just had a blast. But towards the end, I suppose uh, with anxiety and worry, that wasn't at the beginning. I felt completely whole and in control and satisfied and all of the things we need from life. I felt all that for a good 7 years. And then towards the end, I was getting a bit older, new owners were coming in. And then I started realizing, somebody could take this away from me. This isn't actually mine to keep forever. This is, but you know what? I think when you leave an environment like that, and probably similar to Scott, actually, when you leave a big brand, whether it's Five, whether it's Capital, and you were part of that, you still are part of that. So I'm still talking to you now because I worked at Capital. That's why I do the job I do now. That's why I do quite a lot of things I do now. So, but I think it takes a long time to realize that actually even now that's my history. No one can take that away from me. I did 10 years there, whether they like me, whether they don't like me, it's irrelevant. I did it. But towards the end, it was hard because I felt like they were part of it was almost like a family, and I was being sort of taken away from that family. And that family carried on as well. It's like, Capital is still there now and I'm not part of it. And it was trying to piece that together that was the hardest bit, I think.
That's interesting. And I mean, radio is a genre in its own right, and we'll probably have time to talk more about that. But do you think a lot of people have the same experience with radio? Is it that it's an excuse, or not an excuse, but it's a way of finding their real self, and getting rid of all the baggage of the past life and everything else that's going on? It's what the athletes call being in the zone. Is that
Yeah,
something?
I think so. I've often said to Scott, and we do a show together at the moment, I can be in any headspace. I have severe health anxieties. I have other anxieties that I deal with. But actually in that studio, in that 3 hours, it doesn't affect me. It's in my mind, but I'm in the now and I'm in the zone. It's probably the only place I'm in the now. I'm trying to practice that more outside of the studio, but I don't think you have a choice when you're in the studio or on a stage. I don't think you have a choice you have to be in the now because stuff's happening in the now around you. So it's quite good training, I suppose, to ground yourself and focus in the moment. And especially if something happens, me and Scott were on when the Queen died. We had to deal with that and we had to react with that in the moment. We're normally like, hey, we're funny and we do funny stuff. When the Queen died, we have to go, whoa, just got to turn that down slightly. But you have to react in the right way. And we did a really good job on that. So yeah, I think in that studio is my sanctuary, I suppose. That's where I feel more comfortable.
Yeah,
and more like me. I'm more, and that's where I'm more. That's where I'm more like me. When you met me in a studio at Essex, and you said, "Oh, we were very friendly and very nice." That is me. I'm in my zone. I'm in my happy place. That's when you'll definitely see the true me.
Yeah, I was just before you joined us, I was talking to Scott and telling him about my impressions of visiting your studio and everything. I mean, to me, that's okay. I maybe need to get out more, but that was my highlight of last year. I just felt I'd come home. There was some atmosphere in there that I can't put my finger on. But so I think I understand where you're coming from. Now, Scott, what about what about your passion? Did you have a passion from an early age to do things, some things?
It's a weird one for me because I was really shy as a young kid. I was quite shy. I didn't really know what my place was in the world or what I was good at. I wasn't academic at all. So I really struggled. So it was before I found out that I was dyslexic and quite severely dyslexic. I've got the reading age of a 6-year-old, spelling age of a 7-year-old still now I'm 45 this month. So before I knew I was dyslexic, I just thought I was stupid. So I used to walk around not knowing why everyone knew things that I couldn't do. So I was very lost in the early years. And my sister, I've got 2 sisters, Nicola and Hayley. My eldest sister, she was the one that was doing the singing and the acting and stuff, and she was in shows, and I was sort of mesmerised by it. I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like and what Chris just said about escapism is something that really struck a chord with me, because I think in a way, with all of the stuff that was going on in my mind, and no one knew what was going on in my mind, I'm stupid, I'm thick, I couldn't do. So what I would do in class before I picked up singing and acting was I'd just be a dick. I just thought, I can make people laugh, and then I don't have to write on the chalkboard. This is great. So that was my way of dealing with being stupid, as what I thought I was at the time. And then I remember, so I started singing in my bedroom, and I remember a moment, and I was only young. I could only have been 9 or something. And I remember thinking, well, that's sounding quite good. And I remember sort of teaching myself songs, and it was Wet, 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 Marty Pellow. I just wanted to be Marty Pellow. And then I think I was about 11, and I went to an audition with my sister, and it was for Monty Moonbeam's Magnificent Mission was the show. It was at the Towngate Theatre in Basildon, and I was petrified. I remember being absolutely petrified. And all you had to do was stand on the stage and sing Happy Birthday. So all you had to do was sing a verse of Happy Birthday. So everyone's lining up. My sister's already been, and the pianist would do a loop on the piano for then the next person to start. So it's very quick. So the last person would finish, and he'd go dun 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 dun, and he'd go into Happy Birthday, and that's when you're meant to start singing. He got to me, and he'd done the loop, and I went, and I froze, and I stood there and I froze. Done it again, he'd done it again, and I froze 3 times, and then I cried.
Oh.
And he come up to me, a guy called Christopher. He come up to me and he said, "Scott, you can do this." They looked at me, he said, "I believe that you can do this." He went, "No one else is here. You're in your bedroom." And I went, "Oh, okay. I'm in my bedroom." And I sung it, and I got a lead part because I'd nailed it. I'd nailed the audition, even though I, before that, ruined the audition in my eyes. And that was the moment for me. Being on that stage, lights up, first night, singing my solo, not mucking it up, being in my bedroom. I was like, this is life. This is what life is. No, straight away. That changed my 10, 11. And that's what I wanted to do then. So then I didn't care that I was stupid. I used to wander around the school, still causing a little bit of trouble, but no real trouble, just a bit of not concentrating, talking in lesson, getting chucked out of lesson. It didn't bother me because, as Chris said, I was always going to do something, whether it be music, acting. I was always going to achieve that. Nothing was ever going to stop me. And my teachers would say, "Well, you're not going to amount to nothing if you don't concentrate in lesson. You need a backup plan." I go, "I don't need a backup, but backup plans for people that aren't going to be famous. And I'm going to be." And I was.
Well, that shows incredible self-belief. And it's an interesting subject, dyslexia. As you know, I work with elite performers, and a lot of them will tell me the same thing, that they've been labeled at a young age that there's dyslexic. And there clearly must be a stigma about this. And you're saying things that, obviously nobody should say. You were going around as a kid thinking that you're stupid. You're not stupid. I mean, your brain is as good as anybody else's. But that sort of seed got planted.
I didn't know that then. So it wasn't until I went to Sylvia Young Theatre School. So I left my normal secondary school at year 9, and I had an audition for Sylvia Young Theatre School, and the deal was that my mum and dad couldn't afford it. I lived on a council estate, and a very humble upbringing. We didn't have much. My dad worked his absolute bollocks off to support the family. My mum used to work really hard as well as a travel agent. They could barely pay for, my sister's done majorettes. They could barely pay for the batons for majorettes and stuff, so, and I used to think, that they're getting all their stuff, and I got, I felt like I got nothing, but that's not true. They're scrimp and save, and might not have had Nike trainers. I might have had LA gear. My mates would laugh at me. But I was like, wow, I've got some LA gear, amazing. It wasn't until I went to Sylvia's that the headmistress, a woman called Maggie, she noticed. She said, "I know what you're doing. You're deflecting, and I think you're dyslexic." Didn't even know what that meant. And I went for the test. And it wasn't, when I found out, I did, for a moment, I still felt stupid. I was like, oh yeah, that's the dyslexic, that's the stupid thing that I am. But then after that, when I sort of looked into it a little bit more, I realised that my brain worked in a slightly different way. And then I really embraced it because I thought, oh, I remember things. Like, I remember everything. Like, I pick up a script, I read it twice, and I know my lines. And other people can't do that. I'm a really good card player. I don't claim to count cards, but I know what's gone, and I know what he's got, and I'm good at things like that. And other people, so that was my skill, and I was most comfortable with a microphone in my hand. So I learned very easily what it was that I was meant to do in life from a really early age.
Well, yeah, that's fascinating. And I was actually about to ask you a question, which you've kind of half answered already.
Do that.
I was really interested in this thing about dyslexia, when I was working with a lot of them were golfers. And my agent at that time said, one of the people that I represent he's written the best-selling book on dyslexia. He said, I'll give you his phone number and you can give him a call. He might want to have a chat. And I did. And it changed, it was an eye-opener for me, because he said the problem is that people with dyslexia, or the people who are dealing with people with dyslexia, they think it's a problem that that they're missing things. They're not seeing things that are in front of them, like a page or something. He said the problem is the opposite. They see too much. They kind of store every single visual detail, and that's why he said, your golfers you're working with, he said, I would imagine visualization is a big skill in golf. And I said, yeah, it is. He said, well, that's why they're good at it. And I mean, do you think that might apply to you, but partly, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. So I've got dyslexia, but I'm not diagnosed with ADHD or anything. But that's only because I haven't bothered going. There's definitely Chris will tell you. I mean, there's something going on. I don't know what it is. I can't focus for very long on one thing. With the dyslexia, I definitely see, 100%. I see too much, and then I have to try and hyper focus on one thing to achieve that. And you know what? I could get better. I think I don't try to read because I know I can't read. I don't, even at the radio station, if I read something a few times, I can then read it out. If I try and read it straight away, it comes out all mumbled, and nothing makes sense. But I've really learned to deal with it, and I don't hide behind dyslexia anymore. I always said, and with my exams, if I could speak my exams, I think I'd get A's and B's, because it took me a long time to realise I'm not stupid. In actual reality, I'm quite intelligent. I just can't write it down.
I get it. Well, I mean, we've all got something we can't do, but I mean, that doesn't matter. But the stigma that goes with it can matter. It's the way we think about it. I mean, the stuff that I'm useless at, and it used to bother me, but now I've found other people who can sometimes do it. You met my wife, and I'm not good at going into a room of strangers and making small talk and stuff like that. But she is, she has no kind of inhibition or about situations like that. So that's definitely a help to me. Anyway, if I can move back to you, Chris, are you still awake over there?
Yeah. I love Scott's story.
I know, so do I.
Yeah.
So do I. Right now, handling criticism. I'd like to ask you. I mean, the trouble in today's society is that we're under intense scrutiny all the time, on social media and stuff like that. And it's, I don't particularly like social media, but I have to do a certain amount of minimum. But I noticed on any issue, there's 50% of people agreeing, and there's 50% of people strongly disagreeing with anything. Now, I'm assuming that it must be the same for you in radio and the same for Scott, when he's singing, doing things. So how do you handle criticism? Because, I mean, some people can't, with disastrous consequences. So it's quite a big life skill for us to have.
I think for me, and probably more so when I was on Capital, because it was a bigger pool of people. And people would discuss you on forums. There were forums on Digital Spy and websites like that, where you would read, there'd be a thread and it would be Chris Brooks, and then underneath it would be like, oh, he's got such an effective voice, how on earth is he on Capital, and stuff like that. And I think me and Scott have talked about this recently, actually, because it's very easy to see 100 people praising you and one person knocking you, and completely forgetting about the 100 people and concentrating on the one. And to be fair, though, I've always been quite good at blanking that out, because I knew I was good enough to be there. I was sensible enough to know that Capital aren't employing people to make them feel better. They're employing them because they're good enough to be on their radio station. It's a business at the end of the day. So I've seen people suffer from it. And that website I mentioned, Digital Spy, there was a young girl at Capital that almost, one comment on there almost wrecked her career. So I've seen how it can affect people. Luckily for me, at that time, social media wasn't massive. I think MySpace was just about starting, but there were forums where people discussed this. And actually, at Capital, I did cover when Chris Tarrant left the station for good. I was the guy that was on in between him and Johnny Vaughan starting. So I had about a month where I was on breakfast on Capital. And obviously, because Chris Tarrant had left, and I was just this 32-year-old from Wickford in Essex, suddenly appeared on the breakfast show. I think we got quite a lot of text into the studio about that. But again, it never really bothered me, because it wasn't my fault, and it wasn't, he'd left and somebody else was starting. So I think I've always been quite good at that. I don't really listen to criticism unless it's maybe from, one of my bosses, or somebody saying to me, somebody coaching me and saying, we should try this, we should try that. Then of course I'll listen. But most of those people on forums, I think I realized, were people that had probably been booted out the radio industry, lost their gigs, couldn't quite make it to the level I'd made it to. So there was jealousy in there as well. So I think I've always been quite good at knowing when to listen to criticism or when not to listen.
Yeah, well, that's a very good strategy for dealing with it, and I wish we could all be the same. How about you, Scott? You must have had your share of criticism as well as the many plaudits during a...
Yeah, I think you've got to... I work both ways with it, actually. I think you can't read all of the good comments either. I think, people will blow smoke up your ass as well as be horrible about you. And I think there's a fine line. I think there's a middle ground with any comment, good or bad. That's kind of how I work it. So I'm always telling my dad off, actually, because let's say I do a singing video on TikTok, and let's say it does well and it gets loads of views, and there's 1,000 comments, and 999 people go, oh my God, you're amazing, you should go solo, you're incredible, you're better than Justin Bieber, right? So I'll ignore the better than Justin Bieber one, because I'm not, and I'll go, yeah, that's very nice. That's very nice to say, very flattering, but it's not true. No, I'm not. I know my lane. So that's the one to ignore. The other ones are very flattering. You've got a really good voice. You go solo. Pat on the back, Scott. You've done a good job. The one that says you're shit, why don't you go and kill yourself? But which you always get the one. My dad will phone me and go, have you seen that comment about you killing yourself? And I go, Dad, what about all the other comments? Read them, ignore that. That's a sad guy who wants to be a singer that can't be. If anything, he needs a pat on the back. I don't. He needs a bit of help, So, and Christy's right, if someone's giving you criticism but in a constructive way, someone said, oh, your TikToks are amazing, but I think you should get a better microphone because it's muffled, we can't hear you very well. Then of course you should listen to that, because they're being constructive and they're giving you friendly advice. You've just got to filter out the noise, and the noise is people writing a stupid comment. I mean, I don't even understand people on TripAdvisor writing the hotel's rubbish. Don't go back then. Just write something nice if there's something nice to write. And if there's nothing nice to write, just don't bother. That's my opinion.
Yeah, that was what the grandma used to say, wasn't it? If you can't think of something nice to say about somebody,
Don't say it.
Don't say anything at all.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Well, that's a very healthy Zen attitude, and I think we can all learn from that. So here, going back to your audition, freezing on stage twice, you had somebody who saw a spark in you and said, "You can do this." What, just for the people who don't know about your career, how did your music career start from singing Happy Birthday?
So I really got the bug for singing then, and I really enjoyed acting as well. So the part, obviously, it was a musical, so there was singing and acting. I really enjoyed the escapism of the acting. You know, you could channel someone else, and you could be, you know, as a different person. The singing I really loved, and I remember as I got a little bit older and I went to secondary school, and then obviously I had this burning desire to go to Sylvia's. I went for the audition, and it was basically my mum and dad just simply couldn't afford it. If I didn't get some form of scholarship, dream over, I couldn't go. So I went to the audition, and bear in mind they weren't dishing out these scholarships like lollipops. I mean, they were really hard to come by. I mean, I'm pretty sure it might be different now, but at the time I auditioned, they'd only ever given out one full scholarship, and I think they'd only ever given out one half scholarship, and they gave me a half scholarship. So I was, you know, so happy that you know that I'd done well enough in the audition to achieve that, and which meant I got my dream. My mum and dad it still was really hard for them to stump up the rest, and even me, I would work on a market still to try and put some money in, you know, because I just wanted to go to this school. So going to Sylvia's, and academically Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I still was doing the deflecting. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was academic. Thursday, Friday was singing and dancing. So that was my church, you know. And I would go there on Thursday and Friday. If anyone was mucking around on Thursday and Friday, I would go, what are you doing? Like, what are you here for if you're going to mess around in this lesson when you've got some of the best teachers teaching you something that you want to go and achieve? And I've been telling this story for years, and it sounds really arrogant, and it's not meant to be, but this is a real experience at the school. The dancing I was never really good at, so I didn't get much praise there. I would sort of try. I wasn't very good at it. I tried. I could do bits and bobs. I wasn't very flexible, and dancing was never really something I wanted to achieve. Acting, I loved it. Singing, I loved it. My singing teacher, a guy called Mark, and he used to make a spectacle of me, but in a really positive way. He thought it was a good thing. He would get me up first, and he'd get me to sing the song, and he'd go, "Sing it like Scott." And I would say to him at the end of the lesson, "My mates don't like me anymore because you're just putting me on a pedestal and making me, you know, they think I'm a show off, and you're showing me off. I'm not trying to show off. So just let me do me." And they said, "Well, no, because they're all singing the same, and you add a flavour, and you add something to it, and I want them to do that." I said, "But that's my voice. I don't want you to teach everyone to sing like me. I want to sing like me. I don't want anyone to sing like me. It's my thing, my voice." And so I found it difficult in them lessons, because he did, even though after conversations he would still do it. Everyone would do it, and he would go, "Right, Scott, you do it now." And everyone gives Scott a round of applause. It was quite hard, actually. So I knew I had something from him putting me on a pedestal. I knew that I had something maybe that could be channeled into singing, and maybe I should not knock the acting on the head, but I should really hyper focus on the singing. And I've done some bits and bobs in acting. I've done a few. I was in Casualty, and I loved things like that. But the audition that changed my life, obviously, was the 5 one. And I'd been out the night before, underage drinking. I was 17, and I'd been out, and I'd had a skinful. I was drinking beer, lots of it. And my dad woke me up in the morning, and he said, "Scott, you've got this Spice Boys audition," which I'll get to, because we were never going to be called the Spice Boys, but there was a reason for it. "You got this Spice Boys audition." I went, "Oh, Dad, no, seriously." shut the door, I'm not going. And he said, you've got to, it could change your life. And I remember them words. And he doesn't even remember it. See, that's the dyslexia. I remember everything. I remember everything. You can't get away with saying something to me and then 2 years later going, I didn't say that. I go, you did. At this time, you said it. So he said, it will change your life. It could change your life. And I said, I'll only go if you can get 2 of my mates to go with me. Phone Dan and Nick and see if they'll come with me. So my dad's like phoning my mates and going, you go, Scott, you've got to get him out of bed because he's got to go for this audition. And I went with my mate Nick Monk and Dan Brown, and we went up on the train. I may or may not have a hair of the dog. I can't confirm or deny that. But I done the audition, and I was number 22 in a queue of thousands. And Jay was right in front of me, number 21. And I remember having a conversation with him, getting on quite well, which is ironic for what the future would hold. And I just thought, I sang Nothing's Going to Change My Love for You by Glenn Medeiros, which was cheesy as anything. I had a full Kappa tracksuit on, some LA gear trainers, too much gel in my hair. But I'd done the audition and they see something, obviously, and they, we went through to a second audition, and that day it was meant to carry on for weeks, but they just put us in a group of 5. Everyone else was in a group of 4. And Simon Cowell put us in the band that very day. I couldn't tell a soul. I had to leave so a week later I left to be put in a house in Surrey with these 4 guys that I didn't know from Adam, one of them that I'd met previously in Jay. And then obviously got put in the band the following week. The only one person I told was my future mother-in-law. I slipped her my new mobile number and said, give this to Kerry next week, because basically I knew that I would marry Kerry at some point. And she did. So the only person that had my number was my wife. So yeah, pretty fun.
So how long were you in lockdown then in this place, rehearsing presumably?
Do you know, we moved in in the May. Yeah, in the May, and by the Christmas we were top 10 in the UK charts.
Wow.
So quick. We didn't do any, that's the thing, people don't realise. We didn't do what all the other bands did, the 911s, Boyzones, Take That's. We didn't do a school tour. We didn't go around the schools, performing at schools, drumming up fans. That's what every band done to sort of get their data and their network. We were told that it was going to be fast tracked, and it was. I mean, literally from week 1, dance studio, week 2, flying over to Sweden to work with the biggest producers in the world, Dennis Pop, who passed away many years ago, Max Martin, up and coming Max Martin, Herbie Critchlow, all of these people that wrote some of the biggest songs ever, Backstreet Boys songs, Ace of Base, you name it, they'd done it. And as I say, so I'd gone from nothing to, by the Christmas, I remember we had a single out around December time. It might have even been released in November. I was doing Christmas shopping in Surrey, and people were asking for my autograph, and I thought it was mental. And my life sort of changed so quickly from then. And I remember, and the weird thing is, and I don't think I've spoken about this much. It was how everyone thought I would change, so they changed. I didn't change. I come home, same old Scott. But all my friends had changed around me because they didn't know how to treat me. But if they would have just stayed exactly the same, I could have just gone straight back into it and nothing would have changed at all. But actually what happened was they treated me differently. And some of the relationships were strained because they didn't know how to approach what they would see as a pop star. And I was like, well, I am a pop star, yes, but I'm not, I'm just Scott. I'm still the same dickhead that you grew up with. Nothing's changed. And that was actually hard to take, because I didn't know that was happening until later years, when I've worked out, well, hang on, I didn't change, they did. So I just thought people didn't want to be my friend anymore. And in reality, they just didn't know how to be my friend.
So with all of this sudden fame and fortune, you kept yourself humble and grounded, even though people looked at you in a different way.
Yeah.
How are you able to do that? I mean, that's quite a skill.
Kerry, my wife.
Yeah.
Just amazing. She's just the person that I needed. Do you know what I mean? So in all of the madness, Kerry was the person that didn't treat me any differently. She was same old Kerry. She missed me. I missed her. We'd speak on the phone all the time. I'd fly her out to places. She kept me grounded, because I could have lost myself in the madness. And, I've just done this documentary, which actually, Chris, funny enough, I've seen now. I've been sent, Brian McFadden sent me the link so I could watch it earlier, watch it last night. And yeah, I could have lost myself in the madness, but I had someone in Kerry that was so strong for me, that she was my piece of home, I suppose. So wherever I was, I still had this piece of home that I loved. And I would come back and I would just reconnect with Kerry. And then slowly but surely, people started realizing that I was the same. And then I reconnected with a few of my old friends, and I think that's how I ended up staying as normal, grounded as I am.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right.
I think many people do. I mean, there's people that I know in the industry that I've always said, don't believe the hype. Just remember who you are. I think it's so important to not, and it's back to that, not listening to everything, even if it's good. If someone's constantly telling you you're amazing, oh God, you're so amazing, your head just gets big, and then all of a sudden you're on your own, living in a penthouse in London with no one, because you've gone, oh, I don't want to be with you anymore. I don't want to be with you. I'm amazing. Look at me. And I think once you believe in all of the hype, you're broken then. You've got to remember that you're a guy that was brought up on a council estate in Pitsea, which is a shithole. But it's my shithole. And I've just got a nice house in it. That's kind of that's my life.
Okay, so that's how you stayed grounded, which is an exception, I think, I would say, in the industry. How did you handle the performance side of things? I mean, I haven't met any performer who hasn't admitted, okay, yeah, I get butterflies before I go on stage and all that kind of stuff. Did that? How are you? Just 5-10 minutes, half an hour before you go on stage?
I don't get nervous.
Great.
I get excited. I can't wait. I can't wait to get out there. I get like butterflies, but not in butterflies the way I hear other people explain them, like nervous butterflies. I get more nervous at normal things. Like I'll get nervous if my twins are doing a nativity. I get nervous for them. I don't get nervous for I could, even though I've got this shyness about me still, I can put on an act and I can turn it on like that. And Chris will tell me, I could stand on a stage and talk however I'm feeling internally. I will put on a show. I don't get nervous. I do what I do, and this could be something that numbs the nervousness. I don't know. I love a drink before stage. I can't remember many performances that I've done where I've not had a beer. I don't go on stage drunk, but I've always said it goes hand in hand, and that's a bad thing to say. It doesn't have to. I don't want to promote that when you're a performer you have to have a drink, because that's my thing, right? But for me, they go hand in hand. I'm getting ready for a show. Oh, right, what am I doing? Yeah, let's have a beer. Now, luckily for me, I've never taken a drug in my life, and I know that is so hard to believe. And I've had many arguments in pubs actually with people going, oh yeah, obviously you take those drugs, and I go, no, never. And that's because it was never my thing before the band. So why do I need it to become a thing in the band? I always enjoyed a beer when I grew up in Essex with my pals. So I only extended it, and now I've got a rider and people put beers in my room instead of me having to buy them, which is nice. But a lot of people, and I mean, Abs in the band, in 5, he was teetotal, never touched a drug before, never had a drink, didn't like the taste of alcohol, but he let the industry consume him. And then he was looking at all the other artists, the Bobby Williams of this world, and he was, that's what you do when you're a pop star. And he went from this teetotal guy to doing whatever. And I used to watch from afar going, why? I don't get it. But my drug, I suppose, is the beers and the rums. But it's just something that I do when I perform. So maybe that's why I don't get nervous. Maybe that beer is the comfort blanket. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah, I was just thinking about what you're saying, and I won't bore you with the details, but in my past, I used to work in the music industry as well. And there's no doubt that there's a very strong drug and alcohol culture. And I just can't understand when you've got the talent, these people with talent, why their management company or whoever's around them. I'm surprised they don't put more support or even take any interest in that side of things. Well, what do you think about that?
Oh, don't get me started. They don't look after. They didn't look after us at all. And when I was just speaking, then Stephen, this documentary that I've just done, it comes out tomorrow.
Oh.
It's called Boy Bands Forever. It's on BBC Two. It's 3 episodes on the iPlayer, and it's all about that. It's all about the fact that you're in a band, you're thrust into the limelight, and and my experience of it, and pretty much everyone's experience of it, I watched it last night, we didn't get looked after. We got offered drugs, not told to steer away from them. The amount of record company executives, the amount of people in that industry that would go to me, I'd go, I'm so tired, I can't do this photo shoot. And they'd go, have some of this. I mean, that happened on a daily basis at a video shoot, at a photo shoot, at MTV, at wherever you was. It was there. You didn't have to pay for it. I could have taken every drug in the world at no cost to myself. I chose to ignore all of them. And the most extravagant thing I'd done was, I think I remember once I ordered 24 cans of Stella to be delivered into my room, but they had to be from Belgium. And I'll know that if they're not from Belgium because they've got gold top on them when they're in Belgium. And surely enough, I'm in Germany and they deliver these cans of Stella from Belgium. But you didn't get looked after at all. And I was at a point where I was literally having a mental breakdown. And I was shouting it from the rooftops. I didn't know I was having a mental breakdown. I was saying, I don't feel like myself. I need to leave this band. I need some help. I don't know what the help is. So I need someone to put their arm around me and help me, take me somewhere and help me. And the help never come. So in the end, I ended up sort of getting chucked out of the record label because I pinned an executive up against the wall with my foot, which isn't me. I mean, Chris will tell you I'm not a violent person. I'm a lover, not a fighter. I like people. I'm a people person. I'd lost my mind, and how they didn't recognise it is beyond me. They didn't recognise that, because the band didn't need to break up. What needed to happen was they needed to put me in a hospital or something, and then get me sorted, and I could have come back 6 months later, and we could have been back on a stage. But I just had to retreat. My son had just been born, 2 months old. He's in a hospital, premature, and they're trying to get me on Ant deck. And I'm like, why would I care? My son's in the hospital. I'll be here, actually. I will be nowhere else. So, and Kerry being my constant, we had this little life that we brought into the world. The band didn't seem important to me then. So I just jumped ship.
Well, that's incredible. Now, I'm mindful of two things. First of all, that I'm taking up a lot of your time. Secondly, Chris, I know that there's something that's close to your heart, and maybe we can move on to that.
Yeah.
There you are. Good.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Well, I've just enjoyed listening to this so much. You've got two stories that are very different, but also there's some common links. And I know that from our previous conversations, a passion that you both have is for being open about some of the life challenges, because I guess these are my words, not yours. You might be able to help people, through them, or provide some kind of comfort or support. Anyway, what about your words on that? What you're trying to do?
Yeah, I think with the podcast, the A to Z of Men, we're trying to have an open conversation about issues that men go through. I probably suffer more with anxiety. Scott suffers with, and he can talk about things he suffers with. But I think because of where we come from, and because of, we both come from quite humble beginnings, and we both made it to, the top of what it is that we were doing, whether it be radio, whether it be boy bands, but we made it to the top through, I would say, both of us, through adversities, whether it be dyslexia, whether it be doomsday cults, whatever the reason, we had challenges to overcome to get to where we want to be. And I think the A to Z of Men is more about having those open conversations. So we'll talk about stuff that isn't serious. We'll talk about stuff that men talk about. It might be the Roman Empire. It might be premature ejaculation. But then we'll talk about anxiety. We'll talk about body image. We'll talk about mental health. And I just think by having the conversation, just by talking, and I know everyone says that, and it's true, and it's exactly why, Prince William and Prince Harry and Premier League footballers get involved with it, because the more people talking about it, the better. But it's quite nice to have a conversation with your best mate, which Scott is my best mate. And we'll have conversations like this at our house, in the pub, on the phone, in the radio studio. But to have it where you're recording it and letting other people in on those conversations, I get a lot from that. And I think we talk about so many different issues. And I think from what we've done in our lives, there are very big similarities between me and Scott. It's probably why we're so close as friends, whether it be his talking about the drug side of things in the industry, and that was prevalent throughout a lot of the radio stations I worked at, and I'd never been one to do that, to make me perform. I remember saying to a producer once at one of the radio stations I worked at, and he was producing a breakfast show, and he came in, and I was on the breakfast show covering, and he came in and I could see the cocaine on his top lip. And I remember saying to him, if you can't get a buzz from being on the radio, waking up the capital city, and you need that to get going in the morning, that's a problem. Because my high was, where Scott's on stage, my high was being behind that microphone, waking up 3 million Londoners every morning. That was, I didn't need a drug. That was the drug. I've never tried cocaine, but I'm not sure that would even touch that surface. So I think we've both been through similar things in different professions, but it brings us together as people. And I love talking about those things on the A to Z of Men, and I love you do podcasts and stuff as well, and the reaction when you get a reaction back from one person. That young lad, Scott, like 15-year-old, he shouldn't have been listening anyway because it's an over 18 podcast. He shouldn't be listening. But do you remember the letter? It literally changed how he thought about stuff, and you're like, wow, that's powerful. We both do powerful jobs, whether it be radio, whether it be pop stardom. But actually, just one lad emailing and saying, "You really helped me. I've sought help, and I'm going to look at a different way of how I live my life." And you think, Jesus, we might have saved his life. You don't know. I mean, it's quite dramatic, but it's such an important thing to do.
I think we probably did, and to touch on what Chris said about the A to Z of Men, I love how that podcast has evolved. I don't think we ever set out at the very, very beginning. We didn't set out for the podcast to be what it is now. We set out, we wanted to do more stuff together that wasn't just radio. We wanted to do a podcast together. We'd done a podcast together years previous. And if we'd have carried on that podcast, it would be huge now.
It probably would have evolved to what we're doing now, Scott.
Yeah,
it would, that podcast probably would have evolved. But I think, yeah, it did. We did start. I remember the first ever season, and A was for alpha male, and what was the other word? Alpha male, and the first ever podcast we did. It wasn't anxiety. It was age. And now it would be anxiety, because that's kind of where it's evolved to where we talk more openly. But it was more of a podcast about men, like an alpha male. What does that mean? What's a beta male? What's an alpha male?
It had more of a comedy value, and it still has. And there's a light and shade there now. And I've got a friend called Peter, who's an older guy, and he said we done mental health, and he phoned me up and he said, I can't believe that you've just made me laugh and cry on your podcast. And we were like, right, okay, this is like, I think that mental health episode on season 1 was our moment where we went, it was our light bulb moment where we went, shit, we could help people here. We don't have to just be funny, because we know we've got a deeper side to us, because Chris is someone that I can have such open conversations with. You've got friends down the pub, haven't you? You've got your mate that you wouldn't dare say, oh, I'm feeling a bit low, because you'd go, fuck, get over yourself. So you've got these different mates that you can have these conversations with. Now, what me and Chris are trying to do is that every mate becomes someone that you can say that. I want to be able to say to that guy that's so closed, are you all right? Do you need anything? And it's really working. And as you know, Stephen, it's like there's so many men and the suicide rate is so high. And the fact that you've got a pop star, I don't like calling myself that, but unfortunately, but a pop star is someone that's achieved so much in my life, and someone like Chris who's achieved so much in radio, that we've got problems. They can't believe it. They can't believe that I have anxiety, or that Chris has anxiety, or that I don't actually like being in rooms where I don't know all the people in there. When they realise that, we had that other guy, didn't we? He was a plumber or something, Chris, and he was like, I found your podcast and I can't believe that you guys have got problems, but you opening up about your problems has really made me, and he went to the doctor. And he
seeked out from his doctor, yeah.
And that's incredible. And we really want to focus this year and next year on building this podcast even bigger than it is now, because we know it's good. We know how good our podcast is. We need more people to know it's there, and the more people that can share our podcast, I actually think it could go on to help a lot of people through hard times.
Well, it's helping a lot of people already, and I think we've come to the most important thing really in this chat we've had together. I think the work that both of you are doing is tremendous, and it's the kind of work that I try and do as well. And I'll certainly put the word out about your podcasts and do my best to encourage people to sign up for it and listen to it, because there's a need out there, and I don't see it being met anywhere else. All I see is that the rate of mental health in men and women, boys and girls, is just going up and up and up, and there's no sign of it getting any better. So, I'm 100% behind you there. So this is going to be the last question for both of you. I know we've taken so long, but gosh, I could have been talking for hours more. But Scott, it seems like you've got a busy year. I mean, I'm thinking now we're almost in 2025. It seems like you've got a lot on your plate already. Do you have any new plans or any special things you want to do next year?
I want to concentrate a lot on I'm really passionate about the podcast now. I'm going to not be doing the radio as from this week. It's my last week at the radio. Schedule changes and desire to do podcast with Chris and other stuff in next year with Five. So I'm going to take a little bit of time off with Five at the moment, finish at Christmas, just recollect our thoughts. We're not going anywhere. We're just having a little break, and then a really busy year of podcasting and gigging. You know, I think it's a really really big year potentially next year and over the next. And what I want to do is I want the success of whatever I'm doing in Five then and the podcast to coexist. And I think having too many things to do, you know, I'm going to do two things really well. I'm going to work with Five and I'm going to do the podcast. And I think that's enough things to be getting on with, because, you know, if you then put radio in the mix and then if I start trying to pursue acting, you know, I'm going to do four things badly. I'm going to do two things really well. Chris is fully on board with that as well. And I think same with Chris, he can concentrate on doing some really quality radio as well as doing a really good podcast. And I think that's the way to go.
Well, that sounds like a good plan to me. How about you, Chris? What does 2025 hold for you?
I suppose with me and Scott on the radio show, which we do every day, coming to an end, we are still doing a radio show on a Friday, so that will keep the dream alive. But yeah, for me, it's about going back to being on my own on the radio, which is a skill, because obviously you're on your own in a box talking to thousands of people, and it's I haven't done that for a while because I've been with Scott for 4.5 years, so it's going back to my basics of remembering how to do radio one-on-one.
You won't be interrupted, Chris.
Yeah, without being interrupted. Wow, yeah. God, this is going to be amazing. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to going back to doing that, because that's kind of how it all started for me, doing radio on my own. I'm looking forward to the podcast and actually being able to we've got this real ability where we've been able to talk about light and shade in the same podcast, and I want to evolve that more. I want people the laughing and the crying in the same podcast. That's like, wow, I think we've done a good job when we can do that. And I think with Scott taking more of a backseat radio wise to concentrate on the other stuff, then actually that really helps us with the podcast. Scott's obviously a very unique individual in the sense that, you know, what he's achieved in his life and how you've found him. Talking to him now, he's just a normal guy, as the Scott I've always known. That is very powerful for us, and with Scott being able to go out there and sell the A to Z of men to people and sell our product to people and just get people to engage into that will be really powerful for us. And I'm really looking forward to we've the season 4, which starts is it March, Scott?
March, yeah.
That season, I won't give the game away, but it involves our wives. And that season, I think, is going to be, I think that'll be our season. That'll be the one where I think it will suddenly take a different path, and just having our wives involved in that, I think it will change how that podcast gets seen. We've got a new studio, we got cameras set up, so it'd be much more visual. With the whole podcast will be out on YouTube as well. And so I think we're moving to take that podcast somewhere else on season 4. So I'm dead looking forward to that. That's going to be.
I'm so excited about the podcast, and I think, you know, I think if we continue, I mean, listen, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the radio show I do with Chris, and I'm really sort of sad that it's coming to an end. Obviously, we're going to still do Fridays, which is nice. It still keeps me on the radio, which is something I am passionate about. Radio, I love it, and working with Chris for the last 4 years has been absolutely incredible. It's all I ever wanted, you know, to do a show with him, you know, when he liked me, and you know, to continue with the podcast, but actually put everything into the podcast rather than doing the radio, then the podcast. And so, you know, sometimes we have to rush the podcast because we want to get home to our wives and kids, and we're sort of crowbarring a 45-minute episode in at the end of a long work day for Chris, and a 3-hour, you know, feet up session for me. But yeah, I really want to concentrate on the pod and 5, and just balance that out properly.
Okay, well, it sounds to me
balance is the key, Scott.
Balance is the key.
Balance is the key.
well, it sounds like you've got a lot of excitement ahead of you, and I'm going to enjoy watching your progress. And I'd like to thank you both for giving your time today.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. And I hope we'll have an opportunity to get together and have a couple of Stellas as well.